We're given a graph and asked 4 different questions about it. Part A asks how many full cycles occur in the graph from 0 to 2 pi. So the first thing I want to do is identify where 2 pi is, and it's right here. This is 2 pi. So what I'm going to do is trace the graph. I'm starting at 0, and I want to see how many full cycles there are. Now, because I start at 0, 0, and not up here at 1 or 3 or whatever, I know that this is most likely a sine graph. So I'm going to need to trace a hill and a valley to create one full cycle of the graph. So that in light blue would be considered one full cycle. Now I am doing the next one in yellow. So I'm tracing a hill and a valley. So that would be my second full cycle. And then in orange, I'm going to do my last full cycle. So that means that there are a total of 3 full cycles between 0 and 2 pi. And I want to remind you that the number of cycles between 0 and 2 pi is actually your b value, if you were plugging this into an equation. Part B asks us to find the period of the graph. So there are 2 ways we can do that. The first way is by looking at the graph, and the second way I'm actually going to show you first would be to use a little formula. So our little formula to find period, if you know what your b value is that you can take 2 pi and divide it by b. So if I take 2 pi and divide it by 3, which is the b value, this right here would be the period of the graph. Now I kind of wrote over it in blue, but right here you can see this is where the end of that light blue cycle is. If you could see this number right here, it would say 2 pi over 3. And on your paper you can see it hopefully. But that would be the other way, is to identify where one full cycle stopped and then look to see if it was marked on your x-axis what that value was. Part C is asking us to find the amplitude of the graph. So there are 2 ways to do this as well. If you can just look at the graph and see that the midline looks like it's at 0, so I'm going to draw that in. So midline is at 0, and from the midline you're going up 3 and down 3. So that would be the first way to figure out that the amplitude is 3. The second way you could do this, so let me write this down. The second way you could do this is by using a formula. And we talked about this in the previous slide for number 9. Your amplitude is your top y value minus your bottom y value divided by 2. So our top y value here is 3. Bottom y value is -3. So if I did 3 minus -3 over 2, this is actually 6 because you're adding, and then 6 divided by 2 also gives you 3. So either way you should be getting the same amplitude value. Now the last thing is part D. We're asked to write the equation of the graph. So we're going to use all of the things in the previous questions to do this. The first thing that you always write is amplitude, so that's 3. This is a sine graph, and I know that because it starts at 0, 0 and not up or down on the y-axis. So we talked about that a little bit already. All right, so 3 sine, and then the next thing I write is my b value, which we already talked about is this 3, so 3x. And then I don't have a midline well, I do have a midline, but it's at 0, so I don't have to write my k number. I don't have to write that it's +0. So this would be our final answer.